Hi everyone, my name is James Feeney. Welcome to or back to my channel. Today I thought we might have a fun, exploratory chat on the subjects of illusion, disillusion, and maybe a little bit of delusion just for some flavor. I'm going to be using the moon, various depictions of the moon tarot card as a vehicle for speaking about these topics in a way that I can then express a little bit more visually. Likewise, I'm also going to be referencing a journal prompt and subsequent journal entry that are the primary inspirations for my musings and thoughts in this video and the jumping off point. So you all may know that I am a daily journaler. I will pull a card, and lately I've been picking a corresponding prompt from this book here, Journaling the Tarot, a Little Book of Big Questions by Andy Matzner. Highly recommend this if you are looking to start a daily journaling practice. I think having a question to start with as a way of easing yourself into writing or having something to start writing about is the best way to get going. So I will pick a question from this, and the other day I pulled the moon card from, it's the Heart and Hand Tarot by, let's see here, by Liz Blackbird. So, oh, by the way, I'm working with a new filming audio camera setup, so I'm hoping all of this is in focus and good quality, and that this isn't a complete fail and a scrap of a video, but I pulled the moon card from this deck. It's beautiful. And as far as the question or prompt I responded to, we've got, you get 2 pages of questions for each card in the deck, but I picked the question, how have you been disillusioned? To me, that felt the most saucy and scintillating of a question to answer on that given day, so I began to journal on that, and I guess I'll start with a little excerpt from my daily journal to give you an idea of the direction I was going and the thoughts I was having before fully diving into this discussion or ramble. So, mind you, I write these very early in the morning. Sometimes they don't make total sense. The grammar is usually quite appalling. So it might be a little bit of an interpretation for me to try and read this. There's more. I've been illusioned, disillusioned, and then discovered the youthful illusions of my formative years are the truth, while the dreary, jaded reality I'm pressured to conform to is nothing but a world of smoke and mirrors. And I think that this is a subject, a topic, a point in life that I think many of us can resonate and agree upon. The idea that we are, and a lot of us, depending on our caretaking experience as children, are taught that we can do anything, be anybody, that there's magic, and the world is this wonderful, supportive, happy place full of possibility and wonder, only to have the same caretakers or same individuals who espouse those sorts of whimsical, fantasy-related beliefs and values are the same ones who sort of dice them and chop them up and rip them up in front of our face just to tell us that, you know, we're getting older and we need to get on with our lives, be practical, to be productive members of society who contribute, and we need to throw a lot of those dreams out the window, or that a lot of them might not be feasible or possible in reality. And we're becoming, disillusioned. Seemingly, we are being divested of these illusions that we've used for comfort and safety to create a sort of framework of reality for ourselves in our youth, only to find that that isn't something that we can usually get by with in adulthood, at least not when we're functioning in this larger patchwork framework of a reality of the world and society. So thinking about that, I wanted to sort of do a 180 and flip the script in thinking that, and I started on that topic of thinking that I'd been disillusioned, and that sort of very classic coming of age where you mature and the naivety is sort of stripped from us and we are thrust into this harsher world than we imagined, where we have to learn and get on with life and sort of move past some of these more frivolous ways of functioning. I wanted to sort of flip that on its head and imagine that we were, and I was, in some ways being indoctrinated into just an entirely new illusion, one that's a lot less fun, a lot less welcoming than the former, but an illusion all the same, that the world and the sort of consensus reality that a lot of us find ourselves functioning within is just as much an illusion as those fantasies that we are coddled with as children. And in some ways, I think, you can't blame a caretaker, a parent, whoever, for necessarily giving you those stories. I think that they, in a sort of subconscious way, imagine that they're protecting us from a reality, that they want to keep us safe and comforted. They want us to have those years and time of innocence and frivolity and happiness before they know that the world will catch up with us and sort of eat us alive. They want to create that safe space for us. At least that's what they think they're doing. And that's because they, in some way, shape, or form, perhaps view the world to be that unsafe place, that harsh place, and they find themselves contending with these more difficult elements of reality, and they want to postpone our induction into that state of being as long as possible. But I would argue that that harsher reality is an illusion constructed, perpetuated, strengthened by the perceptions of massive amounts of people. I think that the power of groupthink and I apologize, I think somebody's mowing their lawn. The power of groupthink, of grand scale perception, is not to be overlooked or underestimated. It really can create a sort of reality, one that's very difficult for individuals to rebel against, to defect from, to oppose in any given way. We have plenty of us these days that are, and I do think tides are shifting, and we have sort of more dissent and fractured groups that are pushing different ways of existing in one form or another, but that by and large we find it very difficult to navigate outside of this society, I would say, that I imagine functions and is very much an illusion in some ways. We think of things like money at the current moment. It's more of a concept. It's all digital, and it doesn't have anything necessarily physical or tangible to back it up. It really relies upon our participation in a system, our willingness to believe in and validate through words and actions its existence, and without those things it would sort of crumble and fall, and the system itself would as well. Same goes for very false or non-substantiated forms of power and leadership that we only perpetuate through our belief and actions that corroborate the belief in these forms of leadership and power and structure that we have in our society. And that's not to say that these are all sinister and insidious. Of course, there's plenty to be gained from these systems, but I do think a critical lens and view of them being just as much an illusion as anything else can help us to more mindfully interact and exist within these paradigms. And that's really what I was getting at and starting to think of during this journaling time. It was actually a very funny synchronicity or coincidence, if you will, that this coincided with this just past full moon in Libra. My moon is actually in Libra, and it's conjunct with my Chiron, so journaling as a form of healing on that day felt very fitting, and the fact that I had drawn the moon card was just the cherry on top, not to mention that it's coming full circle with me creating a video about this. My moon is in the 5th house of creativity and self-expression, so it seems fitting that I would choose to espouse my ideas, to express them in some outward visual way, and now we find ourselves here. That being said, I have a few different depictions of the moon card here to illustrate a few different ways I think the moon ties into this idea or duality of illusion versus disillusion. Are they really one and the same? Who's to say we're being disillusioned, or if we are actually being indoctrinated into just another illusion, and that this isn't just some infinite existence of layers of illusion. So we've got the Thoth moon card here, where in this sort of esoteric way we are told or taught, looking at the Book of Thoth, for example, It's this sort of navigation, this very well-disciplined navigation through a dark night of the soul, these darker, seedier aspects going toward a light, and that it's not easy. It's really this very mindful, focused practice and dedicated series of actions and way of being that gets us to this truth and helps us to emerge from this murky depth wherein everything is shrouded, nothing is real. There's this sort of seedy underbelly to a way of existing here that we can then escape through, like I said, dedicated and focused, mindful action, and this sort of path, this middle ground path where, one extreme and the other are disregarded in favor of, mindfully acknowledging both but not adhering to either. And we've got those more traditional forms of the moon card. I would argue and say that the Rider-Waite-Smith is pretty close in its imagery to this Dodal and Marseille version of the moon, where we have the two dogs howling at the moon. We're often taught, or many books say that we've got, the wild wolf and the tame dog, that sort of civilized conscious mind that we identify with, and its sort of dualized existence alongside a more instinctive, raw, visceral wolf, who would perhaps be depicted by, or is a depiction of or personification of, an unconscious mind. In some way, we've got that liminal space that we often associate with the moon, the idea of a shore or shallow water, where the sea meets the land, and a crustacean who is a creature who can inhabit both spaces. We've also got in, especially the Rider-Waite-Smith, but you could say in later forms of the Marseille, where some esoteric symbolism is grouped in, those yods descending from the sky, from the heavens, the two towers also being prevalent or present in these depictions as well, and the moon often being personified with a face, at least in this instance. It's not so much so, I would say, we don't really actually, nothing in here I would say looks definitively like a moon in the Thoth, which is funny enough. I mean, you could say, but then I think this is meant to be more of that solar aspect, and this to me does not look much like a moon, but we do have a more personified depiction of the moon as something that might be conscious with a sort of presence to it. All of that being sort of surmised in the idea of illusion and disillusion makes sense. I think for many of us, at least myself, and I have heard this to be the case with many others, the moon is one of those cards that's a little bit more difficult to interpret, which I think is very fitting with its themes, that there's elements of the unknown, the hidden, the unconscious, things that operate in the shadows, deception, warped perceptions, sort of just aspects to life that we don't necessarily have conscious access to. It would make sense that those are more difficult to interpret in a reading or interpret within a card that speaks about said topics. Now, I think that the moon has a larger role to play in reality, both on a symbolic level and a very functional, practical level. Of course, we look at our daylight, the ability to see, we look at the nighttime and the sort of shortened vantage point we get, or this debilitated vision of the world around us, one that is suddenly put into different context and terms, where things can seemingly be turned on their head. And I think that in other smaller scale ways, or on the journey of life, is applicable as well, where our reality can change from day to day. Our perceptions of the world around us can be completely flipped on their head at the flip of a dime, the turn of a dime, however you'd like to put that. But that from one day to the next, the reality that we function within, that we consider our own, is not the same. It's ever changing and evolving. It waxes and wanes in the same ways that we perceive the moon to grow and shrink and disappear and to manifest, is the same way I think we go about our lives, and the way that we perceive the world around us and ourselves. It's constantly growing. It goes through cycles, and all of that feeds into this very interesting duality or singularity in some regards of illusion versus disillusion, and the two not necessarily being separate or on opposite ends of a spectrum, but perhaps being a singular point with two different names, titles, ways of thinking about them, and of course that's a slippery slope, like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, a little bit of delusion for flavor. That I apologize, that is quite loud. I don't know who in the middle of the day is mowing their lawn, but you know, who knows. Wow, maybe I'll just wait for it to pass. Anyway, like I said, it's a slippery slope of a way to start thinking about things. We have this, you know, oh, is time real? Is linear time real? Am I real? Are you real? Is the world around us real? Does anything matter? And then we can fall into this sort of nihilistic spiral where apathy sets in and there's no motivation to participate. I personally like to think or invest, regardless of belief, in the idea that I am here in a physical existence and that to some regard and extent I need to participate in this reality, and regardless or not of if it is real, it should be fun to actively be a member and to enjoy my experience in this reality. But I do think that there are plenty of ways to navigate the world, to shift and tilt my perception and functioning within this reality to suit my needs that may not align with what I'm told necessarily needs to be the objective reality, that I don't necessarily need to be disillusioned or indoctrinated into any other form of illusion other than my own, and that if I'm going to live a life of illusion, regardless of whether or not I believe it, I might as well make that illusion a fun one and one that I've constructed for myself rather than one I feel trapped or caged by, one that I'm forced to participate in against my will. I would just like to, I think that that's just a fun thing to think about, and that's really what this video is all about. I thought I just might share a bit of my 2 cents after having had that journal entry. Likewise, I thought this was a great way for me to test out my new camera and filming setup that I'm excited to experiment with more and see what I can do. I hope you are all well. Like and subscribe if this is fun or interesting, and until next time, bye.